Hello everyone, Aimer back with a continuation of the Big Mission Impossible episode ranking list. Feeling better and want to get this show back on the road? Here we go, let's get right into it. Starting with number 63, Season 1, Episode 1, Pilot. The IMF must get nuclear warheads out of the country of Santa Costa before they are used to threaten the United States. Yes, this is the one that started it all. There's nothing too great or too bad in this one, at least on rewatch. The focus is to establish the tone for the series. And in that vein, it does a fine job. It's difficult to kind of, put things in good or bad, for this one because of its place in the series at the very beginning. This one really shows the value of importance of teamwork to the show, which is why I like it. We get a taste of all of the important aspects that we see over the years. Having guest specialist agents when the task requires. The apartment scene to get a glimpse of some of the gadgets and techniques. The whole layout of a mission. And yes, we get Barbara Bain in a towel, of course, so there's that. This one is better than previous episodes because the action moves at a good pace. And it's not difficult to follow. As I mentioned, it's set to establish the series to a new audience. There's a good guest agent in Wally Cox as Terry Targo. I like his place in this episode, even though his time is cut short. And again, great way to set the tone for the series, as I mentioned. Number 62, Season 5, Episode 17, The Field. The IMF must destroy an enemy attack satellite, despite the fact that the control center is protected with a deadly minefield. This one is a very interesting premise for a show. It results in a somewhat above average hour. There's a good set of quality guest stars in this one, but I think there are actually far too many, and it's difficult for one person to stand out because the screen time is split very thinly amongst all of the actors, including the IMF. So the focus of the episode is all over the place until the final act. This one is notable, though, for creating a clever premise where Leonard Nimoy doesn't have to wear a mask and he can just be himself for the episode, which is somewhat unique, especially in this late stage of the game in his tenure on the show. This one is better than Pilot and previous episodes because we have Michael Baselion as lead detective Rab. He's always great on this show. Amongst the quality guest cast, he does stand out a little bit. Difficult to do, but he manages to do it. The final act between Paris and Dana is really well done and provides a fairly unpredictable but very sensible twist to the plot. Number 61, Season 2, Episode 25, Recovery. The IMF must retrieve a fail-safe mechanism from a downed B-52, which should have self-destructed, from the country of Vatsia, and also bring back defector Paul Shippard, who is assigned to discover how the fail-safe works. This one has Bradford Dillman as Shippard, who comes off as sanctimonious and pretentious in his role, but that's character work and deliberate on his part. He's supposed to be an unlikable jerk. The mission is intricate, it's right up there in the IMF wheelhouse, but it doesn't seem overly complicated or difficult in many ways, because Shippard is quite predictable despite his intelligence. There's some lameness there. The IMF does a good job of making him feel like he's in complete control by creating a situation that he thinks he can exploit and solve, and then whisks the rug right out from under him. This one is better than previous ones because of Shippard being that character. We do want to see him taken down because of his smarm and his arrogance. So despite his lameness, which to me came across the wrong way until I really thought about it, he is engaging enough to make this plot work. The main action sequence of the mission in the final act is also quite good. Number 60, Season 4, Episode 23, The Crane. The IMF must restore the democratic government of Logosia by preventing the execution of rebel leader Constantine and dealing with current military leaders Kozani and Strabo. When I first saw this, I totally marked out, meaning I was just like, ooh, wow, I love this, and how cool an idea it was to use a cherry picker to hide something or someone in the middle of a crowded area, almost in plain sight. I totally love that. I thought it was the greatest thing since sliced bread. But objectively looking at this episode, this is a cookie cutter separate and mislead episode. It's done completely on the Paramount Studios backlot, and it shows. And it bothers me, as in many of these plots, almost all of them, the two guys who were joined at the hip at the beginning of the episode are able to be turned on each other, basically just based on rumor and innuendo. And that makes things a little bit less credible, in my opinion. However, it's better because of the unique use of the crane as part of the plot. The entire feel of the mission is really kind of centered around it and the setting. I actually find that the minimalist production of this episode, for whatever reason, makes this episode better than many others that use the standard formula, and they try to make up for it by being fancy in kind of a way that covers up the fact that sometimes maybe the plot isn't quite, is kind of thin. So in this case, the producers kind of lean into it, and I like it because sometimes less is more. Number 59, Season 4, Episode 8, Mastermind. The IMF must take down Lou Merrick, second in command to Syndicate Chief Jonas Stone, who has a massive blackmail file on government officials, by suckering him into a drug deal while Stone is immobilized and communicating with him through Paris via some freaky mind melding. Poor Donnelly Rhodes again. Just like in the episode The Freeze from the previous season, he, as Lou Merrick, gets victimized by futuristic medical quackery in this one. The fact that this strong, seemingly intelligent guy gets pitted against the IMF and turns himself into a complete schmuck so quickly is a perfect example of how that process can work. But I will say that this is a very underrated con that the IMF pulls, and they definitely earn their win. They bring a very, very strong amount of gaslighting onto this guy that he basically just can't resist. This one is better than the previous episodes because, as I mentioned, it is that above average con. It relies on elaborate timing and information gathering by the IMF. And there's a very, very good sequence where Barney cracks a safe with Merrick's files and Stone's money while the others keep the bad guys busy. Also, Paris kind of selling the way that he has this, imaginary mind meld with Jonas Stone is really, really great here. Number 58. Season 5, Episode 2, Flipside. The IMF must expose and destroy the drug distribution ring that consists of Mel Bracken, his Mexican supplier Diego Maximilian, and U.S. pharmaceutical giant C.W. Cameron. The big problem with this episode, of course, is the ambitious nature of the message regarding the drug trade. But it's not so bad because in this case, the producers took a shot at the manufacturers and high-level distributors who benefit without having to deal with the street-level consequences and tragedies of their wares, rather than just dealing with the street-level action that a lot of shows tend to focus on. The lessons of this episode still resonate today with various crises that happen. It's a unique plot, nothing too flashy, not a lot of rewatch value with this one, but it's still a decent quality episode. This one is better because it has great casting of Sal Mineo as Bracken and Dana Elcar as C.W. Cameron. They fill their roles really, really well, and I love the way that they come across. This is also a very necessary showcase for Leslie Warren, which was very, very much needed, so that is also a positive too. Number 57, Season 1, Episode 18, The Trial. The IMF must stop Joseph Varsh, chief of secret police in an Iron Curtain country, from heating up the Cold War as he plans to put an American through a kangaroo court. It takes quite a bit of work for me to see Carroll O'Connor as anything other than Archie Bunker, but he manages to do it here. He has a great on-screen presence and overshadows Michael Strong as his second in command, which is not easy to do. The plot is fairly old hat and predictable, and the dialogue is sometimes quite repetitive and strained, but this is from season 1. The episode works because it's simple to follow, and Carol O'Connor is entertaining the whole way through. So this one is better because of that good guest cast, not just Carol O'Connor and Michael Strong, but we also have Gail Colby as Lisa, who is excellent, and David Apatashoo as the minister. The courtroom scene at the end, actually there's multiple scenes, they're visually quite good, and Gail Colby and David Apatashoo add a lot to the finish. Number 56, Season 2, Episode 8, The Money Machine. The IMF must neutralize Walter Dubreuil, an unscrupulous African financier who is planning to wreck his country's economy with the help of counterfeiter Raf Tagore. This is the literal pennies from heaven episode. Give the villain exactly what he needs at exactly the right time, just not the way he expects, and let him grab the tainted pennies which will inexorably lead him towards his doom. This one is like the season 1 episode The Diamond, only Brock Peters is better than John Van Drelen in every imaginable way. There's nothing too spectacular here, but there's nothing bad either. And there's a nice amount of real-world detail and thought put into the production, which I really like. There's mentions of needing proper printing paper for the currency, the real-world effect of speculating in stocks, stuff like that. Nice touches and additions to the episode. This one is better because, despite the simple pennies from heaven plot, there is that level of nuance and detail in the story. And as I mentioned, Brock Peters is really good. He carries himself exactly as you would expect a character like Walter Dubreuil to do. He uses an upscale accent. His body language is very fitting, and he really looks like he belongs in that role. He makes me believe. Number 55, Season 2, Episode 1, The Widow. The IMF must take down heroin dealer Alex Kresnick, who is partnered with banker Mark Walters and is planning to sell off a massive haul of drugs. This one combines frequent guest stars William Wyndham and Joe Maross, who both fit into the show structure quite well. They play a variety of roles over all 7 seasons. This one is the first to use the separate and mislead plot, and it does so very well. Many future episodes derive from this one because of how well those two pull it off. As with most episodes that rely on this strategy, the one problem that seems to recur is that one of the marks is so willing to just kind of dismiss or forget about a long-standing partner and accept and trust some random person he just met. That is difficult to deal with sometimes. I think in this one, the pace is deliberately slowed down a little bit because this is the episode that introduces Peter Graves as Jim Phelps. But overall, it's a decent story and a good episode. So this one is better because, as I mentioned, there's great teamwork among the 5 IMFers. Maross and especially Wyndham are really, really good and keep the plot moving. And this one is that landmark episode for the separate and mislead that we see so often later on. Number 54, Season 2, Episode 22, The Killing. The IMF must get evidence to have Burt Gordon, who runs a murder-for-hire organization, put away for good. This episode won a lot of Emmy Awards for things like lighting and production, and I'll grant that it deserves that because these were some very well-done effects for 1967. There is a lot of plotting in the actual plot. The entire cast spends about 12 television minutes just looking around at IMF-generated ghosts and fake natural phenomena, which is not great. The gaslighting of the Gordon house by Barney and Willie also takes up a lot of TV time. It's not terrible, but also not great either. But the end result is good. And given that Burt Gordon is not a pushover, the lengths the IMF goes to in this episode makes sense. This one is better than previous episodes, mostly because of the visual aspects of it. The spookery is excellent and covers up the somewhat thin plot. There's a great fight scene for Jim, in which I believe Peter Graves does his own stunts. And the Burt Gordon character is actually well played by Gerald O'Loughlin, who amazingly shows competence throughout the entire episode. He avoids doing what a lot of villains do and just completely going gaga over Cinnamon at the cost of, kind of losing his mind and his competence in the episode. That's a nice touch. Number 53, Season 4, Episode 18, Gitano. General Aragas plans to murder young King Victor of Sardia and frame Victor's uncle Duke Clement of Montego for the deed, seizing power and destabilizing the area, and the IMF must stop him. This is a unique episode with some elements that we don't find in very many hours of Mission Impossible. We have an unusual guest female operative, a child king to protect, multiple parties that are maneuvering in different directions and have to be maneuvered away in different directions. And the writers are able to pull it off by basically letting the guest characters be somewhat formulaic, almost typecast. What I mean is that Barry Williams as King Victor gets to be the petulant, bratty preteen. Peter Mark Richmond is his usual cocky, arrogant self. And Rudy Solari gets to be the menacing henchman for which he is very, very well suited. The mission doesn't go completely to plan, which also keeps things interesting. So this one is better because of that unique premise and setting, and that excellent casting for the somewhat typecast characters. It's good for some laughs too, and the ending is not predictable, which is also a plus. Number 52, Season 2, Episode 3, The Survivors. 2 scientists and their wives have been kidnapped by enemy agent Eric Stavak, as they have the knowledge to build a superweapon. Stavak is searching for the 3rd scientist, and the IMF must stop him and rescue the hostages. This is a nice episode which is simple to follow but not overly easy for the team to execute. I love Lawrence Dane as an actor. He doesn't get to do a lot in this episode. Albert Paulson is good, but very one-dimensional as well, and that is a shame. However, his character Stavak is no pushover, and the team earns its win. The plan is meticulous, and its execution involves anticipating Stavak constantly double-crossing the IMF. The way that Jim and the crew are able to kind of anticipate and roll with the punches of what Stavak throws at them definitely keeps the rating of this one up. This one is better because you can't have a bad episode with Albert Paulson or Lawrence Dane, and this time you've got them both, even if they are a bit one-dimensional. The ending scene is an absolute hoot, where we get the priceless look of Eric Stavak when he emerges out of a carefully crafted escape tunnel onto a normal everyday street into the waiting hands of police. I love that scene. You can't help but love that one. Number 51. Season 6, Episode 2, Encore. Thomas Kroll and Frank Stevens run a vast criminal empire, and the IMF must put an end to it by doing what conventional law enforcement has been unable to do. Get evidence on them that sticks. Okay, stay with me on this one, alright? I know a lot of you are thinking, how in the heck is this one up so high? Yes, it's contrived. Yes, it's over the top. You can see my full review of what I fully think about this one. Yes, the idea of how the IMF pulls it off is not based in reality. But this one is really entertaining. And it's totally an earned win for the IMF. Not to mention the unique nature of what they're trying to do here and the extent to which they go in order to do it in terms of people, material, and manipulation. There are some inevitable wild cards that require Jim and the others to do some fun maneuvering, and the best part really is watching William Shatner become increasingly convinced that he has been taken back in time. It's grand fun, and I can't help but admire it, and I think fans of this show should appreciate this episode for what it is, a really entertaining hour. So this one is better because, as I've said, it is unique, and despite the over-the-top nature, if you can find a way to suspend your disbelief and just go with it, you will enjoy this. Michael Basselion as Frank Stevens is good, and William Shatner, as I pointed out in my review, is perfect because he sells it. He understands that in order to make this over-the-top episode work, he has to be as over-the-top as he normally is. And there's also suspense in this one to the end. And that's why I believe that it belongs in this place. Okay, so we finally made it through all the episodes up to the top 50. Unbelievable in a way for me that I've gotten this far. I almost don't want it to end. I'm having fun. I hope you guys are enjoying it as well. Thank you all for watching. Please like this review video. Please subscribe to the channel if you haven't already, and please leave your comments about this and other episodes. Stay tuned. The top 50 is going to be coming very, very soon. I'll see you then.